So we're streaming. We are live. Hello everyone. Hello, I hope we've all had a lovely Sunday afternoon. Hope everyone's had their Sunday roast. How's everyone doing? We got Philomena in the chat. Hello. Oh, thank you Basot for the lemons. Hi JK.
Good evening, everybody. How are you all tonight? I hope you're doing well, and welcome to the stream. I am Lynx, and I think most people know who I am.
Yep, I'm Katrina. I'm probably I'm a lot less well known than Lynx. But yep, I enjoy analysing folktales just as Lynx does, and we've got some ones about heroism for you tonight. That's going to be the main theme today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Hello, Resisting the Lies. Oh, and DDJ. DDJ is here. Hello. DDJ's
Hey,
been very helpful. Hi. So, yeah. I think we should maybe just jump right into it with a story if you're about ready to read your one, Lynx, because I think that was the most interesting one that we have for today.
Yeah.
I will just...
We can do that. Just give me a second to find the right tab here. Okay. We're going to start with a Norwegian story tonight. It's one of three that actually includes a dragon. We don't have many dragons in Norwegian stories, so we thought this one was quite appropriate for the topic. And the story is called The Boy Who Turned Himself into a Lion, a Falcon, and an Ant. Once upon a time, there was a man who had an only son, but he lived in want and destitution. So when he lay on his deathbed, he told his son he owned but a sword, a sackcloth, and some breadcrumbs, and this would be his inheritance. When the man was dead, the boy wanted to try his luck out in the world. So he fastened the sword at his waist and packed the breadcrumbs in a sackcloth, for they lived on a hillside far from people. On the road he came to a mountain he had to, and when he had climbed so high he could see over the mountain range, he saw a lion, a falcon, and an ant. They were arguing over the carcass of a dead horse. The boy grew anxious when he saw the lion, but he saw him and called him over to settle the argument between them by dividing the horse, so all got what they deserved. The boy took the sword and divided the horse to the best of his abilities. To the lion he gave the carcass and the largest portion. To the falcon he gave some of the guts and other small parts. But the ant was given the head. When this was done, he said, I think I have divided it fairly now. The lion shall have the biggest part, for he is the largest and the strongest. The falcon shall have the finest bit, for he is fine and discerning. And the ant shall have the head, for he crawls in nooks and crannies. All of them were satisfied with their shares, and asked what he wanted in return for this just division. Have I done you a favor and you are satisfied, then I am well pleased, he said. But I want no payment for the favor. The three insisted that they should have something for his service. If you want nothing else, said the lion, then you should have 3 wishes. But the boy didn't know what to wish for. So the lion asked if he wanted the ability to change into a lion, and the other 2 asked if he wanted to be able to change himself into a falcon and an ant. The boy thought that would be good and well. He threw down a sword and a sackcloth, changed himself into a falcon, and took to the air. As he flew he came by a large lake, but as he was crossing it he became so tired and sore of wing that he could fly no more. and when he saw a rock rising up out of the water, he landed there and rested. This is a strange rock, he thought, and walked about for a time. When he had rested, he changed himself into a falcon again and flew off to the king's estate, where he perched in the tree outside the windows of the king's daughter. She saw the bird and desired to capture it. She lured it to her, and when the falcon had come inside her room, she stood ready, and whoosh! She slammed the door, slammed the window shut, caught the bird, and put it in a cage. When night came, the boy changed himself into an ant and crawled out of the cage. He then changed back into himself and sat on the side of the princess's bed. The princess got scared and started to scream so loud the king woke up and came to her room asking what was wrong. "There's someone here!" screamed the princess. Meanwhile, the boy changed himself back into an ant and crept into the cage before turning himself into a falcon again. The king couldn't see anyone in the room and told his daughter she must have had a nightmare. But as soon as he left the room, the same thing happened again. The boy crept out of the cage, turned back into himself, and sat by the princess's bed. She screamed once again, and the king came running back into the "There's someone here!" screamed the princess again. But the boy hurried back into the cage and sat there as a falcon. The king looked and searched the entire room but found nothing. He grew angry as he couldn't get his night's rest. He told his daughter she was talking nonsense. "If you scream like that once more," he said, "you will be sorry you have the king as your father." As soon as the king was out of the room, the boy was back at the side of the princess. This time she did not scream, even though she was so scared she didn't know what to do. So the boy asked her what she was so afraid of. "Well, I'm betrothed to a man troll," she said, "and the first time I venture out under the open sky, he will take me. When you came, I thought you were the man troll." Every Thursday morning, the man troll sent a messenger in the form of a dragon, which the king had to give 9 well-tended pigs. So the king had decreed that whoever could free him from the dragon should have her hand in marriage and half the kingdom besides. The boy said he would slay the dragon. So when the morning came, the princess went to her father and said there was a boy outside who would free them from the dragon and the pig tax is demanded. The king was glad when he heard this, as the dragon had eaten up so many pigs that there soon would be none left in his kingdom. That day happened to be a Thursday morning, so the boy hurried to where the dragon usually waited for his pigs, guided by the king's foreman. The dragon came as well. He had 9 heads and was so furious and angry that he spat fire and flames when he couldn't see his father. He charged at the boy as if he would eat him alive, but whoosh! The boy turned himself into a lion, and the fight was on. He ripped off one dragon's head after another. The dragon was strong as well and spat fire and flame. As the battle went on, the dragon only had one head left. This was the toughest one. At last the boy managed to rip the last one off as well, and the dragon was done for. The boy went back to the king, and the whole estate rejoiced to be free of the dragon, and the boy could marry the princess. But once the hero was walking in the garden, and the mound troll himself came along, took the princess and flew off in the air with her. The boy wanted to go after him immediately, but the king said he should not do it, for he had no one left now that his daughter was gone. But neither command nor supplication could keep the boy on the king's estate. He changed himself into a falcon and flew off, but he could not see the troll or his princess due to his delay. But he remembered the strange rock in the middle of the large lake where he had rested. He flew back there, changed himself into an ant, and crept through the crack in the rock. After a while he came to a locked door, but he knew how to get in and crawled through the keyhole. There sat an unfamiliar princess, nitpicking a mound troll with 3 heads. "I've come the right way," he thought to himself, for he knew the king had lost 2 daughters before to the troll. "Perhaps I will find the other one as well," he said to him, and crept through the keyhole of another locked door. There sat another unfamiliar princess, nitpicking a troll with 6 heads. He crept through a third keyhole, and in that room sat his bride, the youngest princess. She was nitpicking a troll with 9 heads. He crawled up her leg and pinched her so she would understand it was him and he wanted to talk to her. So she asked the troll if she could get permission to go outside for a little while. She was allowed this, and when she got out, the boy changed back to himself again. He told her to ask the troll if she was never to be allowed to see her father again. Then he changed back to an aunt and sat on her foot as she returned to the 9-headed troll and the task of nitpicking. After a while she fell into thought. You are forgetting to nitpick. What is troubling you? Asked the troll. Oh, I'm just wondering if I will ever be able to visit my father on his estate, said the princess. No, you never will, answered the troll. Not until someone finds the grain of sand that lies beneath the tongue of the 9th head of the dragon that collected the tax from your father. But no one will find it. For should that grain come back over the rock, then all the mountains will burst, and the rock will turn into a gilded palace, and the water into meadows. When the boy heard this, he crept out through all the keyholes, up through the crack in the rock, then changed himself into a falcon again and flew to where the dead dragon lay. He searched until he found a grain of sand under the tongue of the 9th head, flew off with it. But as he came to the water, he became so weary he had to lie down and perch on a stone on the beach for a rest. As he sat there, he closed his eye only for a moment, but the grain of sand fell out of his beak and down between the other grains lying there. He searched for 3 long days before he found the right grain, but when he had, he flew directly to a strange rock with it and dropped it down through the crack. Then all the trolls burst and the rock cracked, and there stood a gilded palace in its place, the most beautiful palace in the whole world. The water was the most beautiful fields and greenest meadows anyone will ever see. And then they went back to the king's estate, and there was much joy and rejoicing. The boy and the youngest daughter should have one another, and they celebrated the wedding of the entire kingdom for 7 weeks to an end. And fare they not well, then you might not fare better, even better. Okay, that was my story for tonight. Okay,
Yep.
so I hope everyone was enjoying that one. It is quite an interesting story.
Yeah, I think we were having a few issues with you being a little bit quiet during that one. A little bit, so apologies for there was like a person also in the YouTube chat who couldn't hear too well, so apologies for that. Um but yeah. So that's I don't know, Links, seeing as you've got like the cultural context for the story, I don't know, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts were upon it upon initial reading.
Um, well, my initial reading of
Mm.
any story is just enjoying the story for itself.
Yeah.
And then much of the symbology started to hit me. To give a
Mm.
cultural context, uh, as I said initially, we don't have many dragons in Norwegian stories, but we do have many
Mm.
trolls. And that is a subject we will handle in episodes, so I won't go too much into those. Well, when it comes to heroes in Norwegian stories, when they are traveled by a troll, it's usually 3 sisters for the trolls have taken. Each sister is with their own troll, and one troll has 3 heads, one troll has
Mhm.
6 heads, and the last one has 9 heads. So you have that classical 369 numbers
Mm.
going on. Um, and also trolls are very tightly connected to mountains. We have several mountain ranges that are named after trolls or have troll-related names. We have even have one called Trollheimen, which is basically the home of the trolls. Um, so
Okay.
people in the stories are when people in the stories are climbing up the hill, then they are basically entering the realm of the trolls. Um,
Okay. Lynx, are you able to hold your mic a little bit closer? Yeah.
I'm holding my microphone exactly up to my mouth. You can't
Okay.
be any closer because then it's in my mouth.
Okay.
So that will be a bit
Uh,
difficult.
yep. So we've got these specific patterns regarding trolls cropping up in Norwegian culture all the time. And of
Yeah.
course, we have that from the myths and stuff that 9 is a pretty magical number. The number of realms in the ancient Norse cosmology of the universe. It's a number associated with Odin. And yeah, so 9 is obviously always a pretty significant number. But I don't know, when I first sort of read that story, like you, I try and enjoy it for just what it is on first read. But it did what particularly struck me was the number 3. And I had some thoughts about its possible relation to the tripartite soul. And for those not familiar, that's generally a very common Indo-European concept of mind, body, and spirit. Or you can put it in different ways. You can put it in body, spirit, soul. But there's generally an idea that there are higher and lower aspects of the soul, and I found it myself to be kind of a story about the mastering of those 3 aspects of the soul from my point of view. And I thought that the lion and the falcon and the ant forms were possibly representative of different parts of that, and I don't know if that's something that you thought about it too, Lynx.
The lion is a common solar symbol and a symbol of the king. And also it has a lot of the warrior aspect of it. And in this story, you see the lion as the falcon is also a solar symbol. For us, it's better known as that from the Egyptian mythology. Um, and basically, every bird is a symbol of gaining um, a connection to your higher self and to source, or God if you want. And what we see in the story is that whenever the boy is as a falcon, he, for the most part, except when he is in the cage, he is seeking first the palace of the king, on the king's estate, where the first thing he does is to meet the princess.
Mm,
And for the rest of the story, he is searching for her or getting what he needs to
mm,
rescue her. So
mm,
uh, with the tripartite tripartite of the soul, I do see that as the hero. Um, oh, how to put it? He's connecting with his anima, his inner female part. But you could also see it as
Mm.
his wedding to the female. You know, that is the wedding of the man as a principle. So, and by doing that, he is proving himself as a kingly figure.
Yeah.
Uh, and with the ants, in the story, he says they creep into prison furnace, and it is able to free itself from the cage. He is able to sneak into the controls and basically observe and not be seen at the same time. So it's both a worker energy and
Mm.
also a more of an invisible energy about it, which I find very interesting. But we don't have any particular view of the ants in that sense in Norway. So it was actually a little surprise. You know, we're more used to there being a fly on the wall, things like that. So
Mm.
that being an ant was quite interesting.
Yeah, I had a think really about the symbology of the animals. And it seemed to me that the lion, when he originally came across the horse carcass, it seemed to me like he was dividing. That was symbolic of his own nature and how one should divide attention between the aspects. I think the lion for me represented, physical courage and the body, and the falcon is, associated with higher values because we know that birds are the messengers of the gods, and they've always represented things. Odin's had ravens, Freya's been able to turn into a falcon. The dove is quite often used to represent the Holy Ghost in Christianity, and that's there. And then the ant is kind of a small and insignificant thing, but it really gets a lot done when it works as a team with all other ants. And I got myself thinking about how he divided it up because, of course, he's given the majority of the horse carcass to the lion. Um, and he's then gone and given what he considers the choicest bits to the bird, and he's given the head to the ant. And that he chose to give that he called the falcon fine and discerning, and he gave the internal organs, probably including the heart, which is commonly referred to as the seat of the soul in many religions, to the falcon. I thought that was quite telling. I
It
don't know what you
was.
would think about that, Links.
Yeah, it's a good analysis. You could say that the lion getting the lion's share of the horse represents the physical body. Um, the falcon getting more of the insides could represent, as I said, with the heart and other internal organs that have um, some significance with that. I don't know that off the top of my head. Uh, the ant getting the head, you could say, is the mind of that
Mm-hmm.
triad. So it really is many different levels we can interpret that. And another thing I found very interesting is how the king, when he loses his third daughter, he just completely gives up. and he just wants to basically stay there and wallow in his pain, which is understandable, of course. But our hero doesn't fall for that. He is unstoppable, even though he, of course, feels the pain of the loss, and he doesn't fall for it. He is determined to get his love back, and he isn't persuaded to stay along, but and even when he loses sight of them, he doesn't give up, but remembers the rock
Mm.
that it was on earlier, and um, yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah, you can see where the old king has failed, where the boy um, wins. And that is also quite a common theme in mythology. Um, well, it's not quite similar because they're not related, but
Mm.
within the concept of the struggle between a father archetype and a son archetype, where the son usually dethrones the father. Um, and while this doesn't happen in the story, he does gain half of the kingdom, which is another aspect of Norwegian tales, where
Yeah.
they usually when there's only a princess, the
Mm.
suitor is promised not only the princess but half the kingdom. Is that anything you have over in Britain?
No, we don't generally, from what I've read, and really, the English education system does woefully neglect folk tales, and I think parents in Britain do too. So I don't think many of us are experts on our native folk tales. But we don't seem to have that trope. We don't seem to have that trope of someone inheriting half the kingdom. I was just thinking about how you said that the king like couldn't go on like when he'd lost his daughter, and I was just thinking about what the king's daughter represented. I think she sort of embodied like truth and beauty itself in the tale. And I think because the hero had chosen to value the higher aspects of his nature, he was always using that form, that falcon form, which is associated with the higher aspects, and which is sort of drawn automatically to the beautiful and the true. I thought that was interesting about what she represented in being, kidnapped and constantly persecuted by ugly things. But yeah, we don't really have similar tropes to these in English folklore. I find the Norwegian tales quite interesting because I don't know if we maybe used to have more of them, but I haven't unearthed that many epic tales from our folklore as of yet.
When it comes to princesses in our stories, we usually get the youngest princess is the prize. Um, the two older one is usually not that desirable, and um, I'm not sure actually quite that is. It could be that she has the most
Mm.
innocence about her. She is the purest. She's not been soiled by the world, so to speak. Um, Whereas the older sisters, they can even be nasty and rude and everything in some cases, but for the most part, they are decent ladies as well. But as I say, the youngest one is usually the prize the hero goes for.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me that the youngest one would be probably the best representation of that
Yeah,
which is unspoiled, that which is beautiful. I can see very much how that works symbolically. And I was just thinking about is there any other sort of thing like how it is with I found it interesting that the dragon wasn't the main conflict. That's something he then has to defeat just to get to the trolls. Okay, I think
YouTube and Stevo. I'm sorry about the mic. We will have that fixed the next one. I think my co-host is back. Yes, she is. We do actually have quite a few epic stories like that. Our stories vary from advice how to find a good wife to just nonsensical stories to the more epic stories like this one. And I did find it quite interesting that the dragon had 9 heads, and that definitely ties it to the troll with 9 heads. And I wonder when the other trolls came for the princess's older sisters, was there a dragon that came with them as well? You know, a dragon with 3 heads and a dragon with 6 heads. We don't see them, but I definitely wonder about that.
yeah, I do again notice that symbolism of 9. I dropped out just then? Yes, I
Yeah,
think I did. Yeah,
that's
suddenly my
fine.
Discord just disappears from my screen, and I'm just
Hmm.
like, what? What in hell? And why now? Ugh.
Yeah, but perhaps the trolls are messing with our tech today.
Who knows? They could be.
Who knows?
They might not
Yeah,
like us bad mouthing them, and because
yeah,
I'm about to badmouth them. I'm about to um completely characterize them as the forces of chaos in
yeah.
this story being overcome by an enlightened man. No, what
Mhm.
I found very interesting was he defeats this dragon, but the actual key to winning the day is finding a little grain of sand under its tongue, getting that, and dropping it under the trolls. Dropping it on the trolls. And, like, he doesn't even manage that first try. He drops it and has to look for it again. So 3 whole days. Which is a bit of an endeavour after you've just slain a 9-headed dragon, would you not think? Definitely. And I was just
Yeah,
wondering about the symbolism of that grain of sand. Like he seems to
yeah,
find it in the aftermath of battle, like
yeah.
heroic battle, and then lose it, and then
Mhm.
spend ages looking for it again, and then is finally able to defeat evil with it. And I thought that was quite characteristic of transcendence itself.
Yeah,
Like it can appear situationally in some sort of high stress situations, but that might not be permanent. And actually, the real looking for it takes a sort of long and considered time.
yeah,
And then he's got hold of it and has a grasp on it for good. and then he's able to drop it on the trolls and transmute all of that water into meadows. And of course we can talk about water. We can talk about primordial waters. And we can talk about how chaotic water must have seemed to ancient people. And to people not even that long ago. Before you had any big, reliable mechanical boats. So yeah, I don't know, the symbolism of that, certainly. It seems to me like he's found what he's found is pure spiritual connection with the divine in his falcon form, and he's used that to defeat, the forces representing chaos, which is the trolls under the water.
Yeah. I have tried to figure out that grain of sand, which I consistently want to say grain of salt.
Yeah.
It does remind me of, that grain of sand that comes into a shell and produces a pearl. And that is basically irritating. So, and those shells are also, of course, in the water. So you could say that the dragon is the container of a potential pearl. The dragon is sent from a mystic rock in a large sea, or a large lake. The lake can also represent the subconscious, and the trolls in the middle of it, and including the dragon. You have to fight your own fears and get past yourself, basically. Because as we see with the king, it's his mental state that does that. He decides not to fight, and just wants his daughter to just be left with the troll. And also losing a grain of salt in a bank of sand. It really reminds of looking for a hay in a haystack.
A
Not
needle
even a
in a
needle.
haystack. Yeah.
Well,
A hay in a
yeah,
haystack, yeah.
yeah,
That would be more like it, seeing as actually probably the fair percentage of sand is salt of some
yeah.
sort, yeah. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
yeah, well, it could be that one grain of sand was a bit different, since he's able to
Yeah.
find it and distinguish it
Hmm.
from the others. So,
And that speaks of someone whose senses are so highly developed in the physical and in the supernatural sense that they can detect that difference in the energy or the look between this one special grain of sand
mm,
and so many thousands of others. Even if it
yeah,
does take even them like 3 whole days to
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, you would think that it would be easier for the falcon to just take mouthfuls of sand and just drop it on the island just in case he
Yeah,
has
just.
found the right one within the many.
I mean, that would have been a more logical process.
Yeah,
But
he would,
I feel like fate or something would have considered him cheating.
yeah.
Fate just would have been like, no, no, that's not how that works. You don't just process of elimination this. How dare you?
Mhm.
This is meant
Yeah.
to be epic. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's sort of like. That's why I don't. That's another That's sort of like the modern fault in reading all fairy tales, isn't it? Like, why didn't they do this? That would have been the most logical thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
definitely tells us a bit about the modern way of thinking compared to
Mm.
the old way of thinking, or even just the difference between a child and a grown-up, because the children take these stories more naturally. Of course, you do have the children that ask questions about basically everything. Why is this done? Why do you do it that way? And always questions and drives everyone mad around it. But for the most part, children take the stories for what they are, and that's the simplicity of these stories. As an adult, it's easy to just dismiss them because they are so simple in many ways.
Mm. Indeed.
But the truth in them, the wisdom and the knowledge that is in them, that is something that should be easy to pass on. The downside of that is that it's so easily dismissed as you grow up. It's just a fairy tale. It's just a folk tale. It's just a story.
Yeah.
You know. Um,
That is
um,
that is definitely exactly what it is, and I think people sometimes they classify these tales as a bit obscure because they're taking everything like a little too literally, but it doesn't take much to just scratch the surface, and even within this tale you do a little bit of research into the symbolism of these things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when
People
you look at
ask
it,
in the chat who I am. I'm
okay,
Katrina. That's the name we're going by right now. Anyways, yes, I am the massive dragon eye.
yeah,
That's because my form is so massive that that's the only amount of me that can fit into this dimension. Even. Yeah.
yeah.
No, like I just like that dragon eye. I thought it looked quite feminine. It's the only dragon I've seen that looked like it was wearing winged eyeliner.
Yeah, I actually have to say I was tempted to exchange my links for a dragon for a moment, but the links has sort of become a part of who I am.
Yeah, I like your links.
Yeah, uh, I do like that particular picture as well. I have to
Mm,
say, it's kind of fun. Um,
but
but
yeah.
when we grow up, and get older and understand more, there are a lot of things that we can gain from these stories, of more of the hidden knowledge, even though it's very clear in many ways. Uh, we can, look at the symbolism, and I will say that nitpicking, I'm not really sure what a higher meaning we can find from that, other than the trolls are very, very dirty, riddled with lies. But it might be a metaphor
Yes.
for more adult stuff.
I don't know. When I saw nitpicking specifically, that was odd to read as an English person because um maybe you know, maybe you don't, but that's specifically designated for like pointlessly obsessing over details.
Uh,
That's what it is, and that's the first thing that comes to mind. But yeah, I suppose if trolls kidnap young ladies, they don't want it to get too graphic.
no. I did rely on a translation I found on the internet. I mainly did my own, but for some things I find it a bit hard to find the right word. And
Mm.
that was made by an Englishman who is residing in Norway and are translating our fairy tales. And
Okay.
that was his fairy tale, his translation. So
Yeah.
I will put that down to him, and I will share the link in D-Live, and you can
Yeah.
share the link on YouTube because I can't share that.
Yes. No, we
Yeah,
should definitely drop the links for all of these things so that people can have them. I'm just going to copy that over into the YouTube chat right now.
yeah. That link is for the table of content. I will.
Yeah. So that's in the YouTube that now, folks.
Yeah.
What's going on YouTube? Katrina sounds like a
uh,
Russian name to me. It does. It's a little bit Russian. Still though,
it's quite low.
Indo-European, valid
Yes. We have
counts.
people called Katrina over here as well. I do have to say I'm a bit reminded of that hurricane that came in the US a few years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
hurricane associated name. Oh well,
yeah,
we're going with powerful natural forces here. I guess I have a great
yeah,
big dragon as an icon. It's
yeah.
quite destructive, really, in terms of the themes. I don't know what that says about my psyche. I don't know what that says about my psyche at all.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe we shouldn't dive into psychoanalysis of that one.
no, I don't
and
think so. But,
and just a little reminder for those looking for the story. This one was called "The Boy Who Turned Himself into a Lion, a Falcon, and an Ant."
which is quite literal, really. That's pretty
Yeah.
much exactly what happens.
Mhm.
Yeah, he does tend to use there's a couple of other aspects really. Um, the way in which it ends is one of them. You know, he gets to it turns into a grand palace and meadows from the water. And I thought there was something in that about creating order out of chaos.
Yeah. And when he was seeking his inner power, when the lake is a lake, yeah, he has no firm footing. He either needs wings or a boat or the ability to swim over. But when he finds that, then the footing is firm. He knows where he's treading, and it's you could say so. The transformation of the rock into a palace is that definitely reminds me of the grain of sand becoming a the grain of sand becoming a pearl in a shell. So you could say that his efforts are making his own huge grain of sand into a gilded palace, which is quite interesting, I have to say.
Yeah, I do think so. And it's yeah, I think that one was just for me the whole process of what it takes in terms of balance in all aspects of the person, um, the mind, the soul, the body, and that being what it takes to be a hero and overcome evil. I think on
Yeah,
the whole, that's what I took from that one.
yeah.
Definitely.
And one last thing I want to mention, I find it interesting that
Mm.
basically the only thing worse that his father left him was a sword, and he didn't have to fight with it, uh, like you would expect him to. When he goes out uh, from his home, you would expect that he would have to use that sword in sort of some sort of fight with someone, but he
Yeah.
uses it for justice and for dividing something up justly. So it's uh, it's made for good, and when it does, he is granted, you could say, three gifts from the gods, so to speak.
Yeah. I'd say that they were maybe gifts from the gods or from powerful spirits. And that's interesting. That's interesting that the foundation of of the tale is a man who uses his inheritance in order to spread justice.
Yeah,
And I think also what I got from that was after that point, he abandons the sword and the sackcloth full of breadcrumbs. And I
yeah,
think that was also symbolic of him, like, giving up his earthly possessions and earthly inheritance and
yeah,
seeking something of a bit more worth, because now he has the ability, to possess these other forms, to use the body of the lion and the spiritual, flying, traveling powers of the falcon, and the he can utilize the sort of deceptive, sneaky, hiding powers of the ant, which I think is like the mind.
yeah,
I think I took it to be like the mind, and he
yeah,
knows when to use these things all in their
mhm,
proper place.
yeah,
He stopped being an earthly, flawed human.
yeah.
Yeah.
And another aspect when he lays down the sword and the breadcrumbs is that he lays his identity as the son behind him and ventures along as a man. So he's starting to make the journey into uh, becoming his fullest potential. And it's also interesting that, it's not just that he lays down a weapon, he's also laying down his only food, which one would think you would want to have on a journey. Of course, as a falcon and a lion, yeah, I'm sure you can just capture food, but still, uh, it's a sign of, becoming a man, becoming self-reliant, and as I said, with the aunt getting the head, and specifically that it crawls in, into crooks and crannies and everything. You could say that the ant is exploring the mind and getting to know it, and every little turn it takes, and um, then it does that later on in the rock as well, exploring all the crooks and crannies and going through keyholes and everything. So yeah, I definitely found that very interesting part of the story.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that one's probably the biggest story we've got to cover tonight. But there's also a couple of stories that I had as well, and I think there was one of them in particular from Scotland that was quite funny, because I've never actually before encountered a story about how, like, not to do heroing. It's someone who totally fails at seizing destiny. Seasoning destiny. That was a weird slip. But yeah, seasoning. Like you can put some salt on it.
Yeah, a little salt goes a long way.
When it comes to destiny, I mean, they do say it
Yeah,
wards off evil and the devil. They're
yeah,
very they're very very they're very adamant about the power of salt. Destiny is
yeah,
spicy. It is
yeah.
spicy.
We
That's what it
we
would
even
be.
we even have a folk tale about salt. So
Huh.
maybe we can dive into that one in another episode.
Oh yeah, maybe we
But
could.
yeah, but please give us the story about how not to
Hmm.
become a hero or not become a
So
hero.
yeah. So this one is from a book of folk tales from Scotland, I think from around 1889, and I'll just drop the link in the chat. And it's on World of Tales. A lot of these websites look straight out of the 2000s, to be honest. But there's a load of these very little collections of folk stories all over the internet, which have collected stuff from books that are no longer copyrighted. And this one is from Scotland in particular, and it's called Canobie Dick and Thomas of Ercildoun. And yep, I am I am based in Scotland, but I have to say I'm maybe still not the best at Scottish pronunciation, so do please forgive me if I get that wrong. Now, it chanced many years since that there lived on the borders a jolly rattling horse cowper, just means horse trader, who was remarkable for a reckless and fierce temper, a fearless temper, which made him admired and a little dreaded among his neighbours. One moonlit night, as he rode o'er the Bowden Moor on the west side of Eildon Hills, the scene of Thomas the Rhymer's prophecies, and often mentioned in his history, having a brace of horses along with him, which he had not been able to dispose of, he met a man of venerable appearance and singularly antique dress, who, to his great surprise, asked the price of the horses, and began to chaffer with him on the subject. To Canobie Dick, for so shall we call our border dealer, a chap was a chap, and he would have sold a horse to the devil himself without minding his cloven hoof, and probably would have cheated old Nick into the bargain. The stranger paid the price they agreed on, and all that puzzled Dick in the transaction was that the gold which he received was in unicorns, bonnet pieces, and other ancient coins, which would have been invaluable to collectors, but were rather troublesome in modern currency. It was gold, however, and therefore Dick contrived to get better value for the coin than perhaps he gave to his customer. By the command of so good a merchant, he brought horses to the same spot more than once, the purchaser only stipulating that he should always come by night and alone. I do not know whether it was from mere curiosity, or whether some hope of gain mixed with it, but after Dick had sold several horses this way, he began to complain that dry bargains were unlucky, and to hint that since his chap must live in the neighbourhood, he ought, in the courtesy of dealing, to treat him to half a mutchkin. Presume that just means drink. You may see my dwelling if you will, said the stranger, but if you lose courage at what you see there, it will rue you. No, you will rue it all your life. Dickon, however, laughed the warning to scorn, and having alighted to secure his horse, he followed the stranger up a narrow footpath, which led them up the hills to the singular eminence stuck betwixt the most southern and centre peaks, and called, from its resemblance to such an animal in its form, the Luck and Hare. At the foot of this eminence, which is almost as famous for witch meetings as the neighbouring windmill of Kipilor, Dick was somewhat startled to observe that his conductor entered the hillside by a passage or cavern, of which he himself, though well acquainted with the spot, had never seen nor heard. "You may still return," said his guide, looking ominously back upon him. But Dick scorned to show the white feather, and on they went. They entered a very long range of stables. In every stall stood a coal-black horse. By every horse lay a knight in coal-black armour, with a drawn sword in his hand, but all were as silent, hoof and limb, as if they had been cut out of marble. A great number of torches lent a gloomy lustre to the hall, which, like those of the Caliph of Vastek, was of large dimensions. At the upper end, however, they at length arrived, where a sword and a horn lay on an antique table. "He that shall sound that horn, and draw that sword," said the stranger, who now intimated that he was the famous Thomas of Ercildoun, "shall, if his heart fail him not, be king over all broad Britain. So speaks the tongue that cannot lie. But all depends on courage, and much on your taking the sword or horn first." Dick was much disposed to take the sword, but his bold spirit was quailed by the supernatural terrors of the hall, and he thought to unsheath the sword first might be construed into defiance, and give offence to the powers of the mountain. He took the bugle with a trembling hand, and blew a feeble note, but loud enough to produce a terrible answer. Thunder rolled in stunning peals through the immense hall. Horses and men started to life. The steeds snorted, stamped, ground their bits, and tossed their heads. The warriors sprang to their feet, clashed their armour, and brandished their swords. Dick's terror was extreme at seeing the whole army, which had been so lately silent as the grave, in uproar and about to rush on him. He dropped the horn, and made a feeble attempt to seize the enchanted sword. But at the same moment a voice pronounced aloud the mysterious words, "Woe to the coward that ever he was born, who did not draw the sword before he blew the horn." At the same time a whirlwind of irresistible fury howled through the long hall, bore the unfortunate horse-jockey clear out of the mouth of the cavern, and precipitated him over a steep bank of loose stones, where the shepherds found him the next morning, with just breath sufficient to tell his fearful tale, after concluding which he expired. So yeah, that was the tale of Canobie Dick, and I thought that was interesting. I'd never really seen a tale about completely failing to become a hero. I'd never seen a tale where somebody actually just had that chance to seize destiny in front of them, and it just ended with they don't.
An interesting development in that story, because as you say, we usually follow people who manage the task and completes the hero's journey. So it was quite interesting that this one failed. we did talk a little bit about this might be a newer story. We did speculate that it might
Yeah, it might indeed
originate.
be,
Yeah, uh,
because I
it did.
don't see that as very consistent with the ancient mindset. And when you look at also Thomas of Ercildoun, it comes up with Thomas the Rhymer. Now he was also known as Thomas Learmont, or True Thomas, and he was a Scottish laird. I think that's how you pronounce that. And he was he had the gift of prophecy and the inability to tell a lie. Um, and he's the one guiding this man to the forces of destiny. So there's that element of the tale as well. That there's a prophet, a known prophet involved in this.
Yeah, it does remind me about the freedom struggle of Scotland,
Mm,
and I did speculate for a little while if it originated after the rebellion they had against the English in, I think it was 1718.
mm,
That was the first Jacobine uprising, when the grandfather of Bonnie Prince Charlie tried to take the Scottish throne. Uh,
mm.
I do think, at least, with the Jacobines, they all also used sort of, the more mythology, I think, and prophecy and everything that might have been in play. Um, the royal families have often used those kinds of arguments for why they are, uh, destined to have the throne, and there are particular bloodline, and for a long time, many of them claimed to be descendants of old heroes, or even gods, and that was the reason why their family should have the throne. So I did find that, yeah, aspect interesting, and it also reminded me a bit about from The Return of the King by Tolkien,
Yeah.
when Aragorn is going into the mountain and facing the army of the dead to
Mm,
have them fight for him. He has his magic sword that is the only one that can compel them to uphold their oath. So it definitely reminded me of that. Of course, that is a more modern story, but Tolkien did
yeah.
use all the sources. So it might have been quite a prominent
Mm.
theme.
Yeah, he definitely did use all the sources. He wholesale
Yeah,
rips the names of his dwarfs out of the poetic Edda.
yeah,
Wholesale. But yeah, it could be quite old. It could, from what I'm seeing, like Thomas of Ercildoun seems to be around from about 1400, maybe. But it's an interesting theory that this, happens after that this was a story maybe composed after Scotland was sort of taken over by the English, because it's a failure to pick up the sword. Although Scotland definitely did pick up the sword against the English for a while. and there was a lot of fighting for a lot of years. But yeah, it might have come at a time when Scotland felt subjugated and like it hadn't quite seized destiny for itself. I
Yeah.
took it on the personal level as well, of what it takes for a man to be a hero is that yes, he's prepared to use the diplomatic means. So he's got the horn ready. He's ready to like alert the opposing camp and signal that he wishes to talk with them. But before even picking that up, he's also fully ready to fight overwhelming odds. And I think perhaps even though that was written down in 1889, I know that until in the Victorian times there were still echoes of that heroic culture around. Like they were sort of trying to revive a lot of that stuff, Arthurian, Greek myths. They were sort of trying to keep that alive.
Yeah. And they do have a very long and proud history and traditions. So, one thing you can't fault the Scottish of is courage. And even if they did lose to the English at Culloden, I don't think the Scottish spirit was entirely crushed.
No.
They have been very significant in the British Army since that, and
I believe most of our special forces actually come from Scotland.
yeah, that's my impression as well. Though I won't claim to have any strong knowledge about the British military, but I
No, neither do
do,
I. That seems to be more of a man's hobby to know
yeah,
extensive amounts about the military, probably for
yeah.
good reason.
Yeah, I do know that the British definitely took advantage of. Uh, I have to admit they strong-armed the Scottish in many ways,
Yeah.
but they did manage to have many Scottish men fight for them in the years after, and they were fierce warriors. So the cause might have changed a bit, but the ability and the warrior spirit was unchanged, I would say. So big
Mm.
up to the Scottish men. A big applause to them. Um,
Yeah, they're quite a mixture, really. There's Celtic mostly and Brittonic, with some added Viking up near the top. There's quite a lot of warlike races in one area.
yeah.
I'm not surprised. But yeah, I thought that was just a very interesting one about because this man didn't have the courage to fight, even in the face of what would have looked like certain death. It wasn't actually certain death, and because he didn't have the courage to fight, he died.
What I find interesting is that he wouldn't want to draw the sword first, even though the army appears to be asleep.
Hmm,
That one aspect was really interesting in that story.
that is true.
Because Yeah, because why would you be afraid of drawing a sword to an army that's asleep? You could
Well,
basically just take the sword and leave.
I suppose he was actually just that sort of cowed by the amount of men that were there and
Yeah,
sort of the atmosphere, and he let it intimidate him and thought, oh, what if
yeah.
they wake up?
Mhm.
And he didn't quite have the presence of mind in the moment to go, you know, actually, to take charge means you take the decisive action and you don't show fear. I can just pick up this sword. All these guys are asleep, and he didn't. I guess that didn't occur to him because he just didn't have the fiber of the sort of man who would think in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick shout out here.
Yeah.
Ferocious Chihuahua and Right Meow are hosting us now, so thank
Oh
you.
wow, that's
That
really
is,
cool.
yeah, that's very great of you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
I like ferocious Chihuahua's gif.
Yeah, that
Oh,
is a funny one.
yeah, that's really great of you guys.
Yeah, I just love this community. It's so full of good people, and you know, we've got so much support from so many people. It's really heartwarming. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just wanted to shout out to everyone
Mhm.
and say thank you.
Oh hello, hadn't noticed Mighty Goose was about. Yeah.
Ah, Jewel has an interesting commentary. Scotland is indeed overrepresented in the special forces. Ah, so they still have that warrior spirit then.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Oh, we have another author,
oh
Askiku47. Thank you. That is really good of you.
wow,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of people supporting us out here, and we're really grateful to all of you, for coming along and listening and hosting us. And it's just really great to see all of the support. I guess we got the final story that we were looking at tonight was literally just that of Saint George and the Dragon.
Which I'm really glad you wanted to do because
Mhm.
I've heard all of the story, but I never heard the story. So I'm definitely going to sit down
Yeah.
with my cup of tea and just enjoy this one.
So there are a few versions of the legends of George and the Dragon, but they do kind of agree. They always agree that a town was terrorized by a dragon. They always agree that a young princess was offered to the dragon, and that George, you know, did slay it. And the one I'm reading at the moment is from ProjectBritain.com, which is basically just a compilation of many different aspects of British culture, and it's very sort of homemade and compiled by someone who just really liked British culture. And so here's the version that they've got. St. George travelled for many months by land and sea until he came to Libya. Here he met a poor hermit who told him that everyone in that land was in great distress, for a dragon had long ravaged the country. Every day, said the old man, he demands the sacrifice of a beautiful maiden, and now all the young girls have been killed. The king's daughter alone remains, and unless we can find a knight who will slay the dragon, she will be sacrificed tomorrow. The king of Egypt will give his daughter in marriage to the champion who overcomes this terrible monster. When St. George heard this story he was determined to try and save the princess. So he rested that night in the hermit's hut, and at daybreak set out to the valley where the dragon lived. He drew near, and saw a little procession of women, headed by a beautiful girl dressed in pure Arabian silk. The Princess Sabra was being led by her attendants to the place of her death. The knight spurred his horse and overtook the ladies. He comforted them with brave words and persuaded the princess to return to the palace. Then he entered the valley. As soon as the dragon saw him, it rushed from his cave. roaring with a sound louder than thunder. Its head was immense and its tail 50 feet long. But St. George was not afraid. He struck the monster with his spear, hoping he would wound it. The dragon's scales were so hard that the spear broke into 1,000 pieces, and St. George fell from his horse. Fortunately, he rolled under an enchanted orange tree against which no poison could prevail, so that the venomous dragon was unable to hurt him. Within a few minutes he had recovered his strength and was able to fight again. He smote the beast with his sword, but the dragon poured poison on him and his armor split in two. Once more he refreshed himself from the orange tree, and then with his sword in hand he rushed at the dragon and pierced it under the wing, where there were no scales, so that it fell dead at his feet. And then St. George went back to the palace and was thanked by all the people and claimed as princess. And that is the legend of how St. George slayed the dragon. They sort of stopped that one a little bit earlier. That one would like. But yeah, I'd never actually been told the story of St. George and the Dragon throughout all of my schooling. I'd never actually been ever showed that in school, and I think where I went to school they did place some emphasis on traditional sort of arts. I remember having to learn country dancing. But yeah.
It's quite odd that no one ever told you that story, considering, St. George's Day being the national day of England. So,
yeah. It is extremely odd, but what we've started to do in England is sort of ignore St. George's Day, and there is a whole lot more people who are more fussed about St. Patrick's Day. And not a lot of people celebrate St. George's Day anymore because I think it's seen as too patriotic nowadays. I think it's seen as somewhat dodgy, as if one can be too English and too patriotic and too proud, and having England flags up is associated with being like a lower class thing. And it's very sort of, I think there's a lot of snobbery around St. George's Day. Canadian. George is a saint now. Not that George. Oh, I see. Which George did you think? He's Saint George. He's the patron saint of several countries.
Well, I do think she might have been referring to a more recent Saint George.
Well, there's some. He's patron. So I'm looking at St. George's Society. There's a whole society of St. George, and they say that he is the patron saint of Georgia, Malta, Portugal, Catalonia, and Aragon in Spain, and Romania, among others. So there's a lot of people who've been inspired by the legend of this man, who they always try and tell you was Turkish, but I think he was in fact Greek. Even Wikipedia says he was in fact Greek.
I have seen him sort of being degraded, oh, he's not English, there's no dragons in England, and I did read another story that is more of a full story of that one. I can link that in the live as well. Um, that one takes place in, he travels to Egypt.
Mhm.
So I would guess that he was uh, doing all of this outside of England will also
Mm.
be a point that people use against him being the patron saint of of England and everything, which I just find quite
Yeah, the Mighty Goose
hilarious.
specifies that he was Greek in Roman Cappadocia.
Yeah, I have to admit I don't know
Yeah.
where that is on a map, but
I don't know where Roman Cappadocia is on a map. I'm terribly
uh,
bad at Romans.
yeah, well, if the claim is Turkish, then that might be in today's Turkey. So
Yes, might indeed be.
yeah, because you know, magic soil and everything, that old argument.
Yeah.
So all the Greeks in modern day Turkey must be Turkish. So
I never actually heard of there being any sort of magical tree involved either. And that did remind me of like a tree full of fruits that was revitalizing and refreshing. That did remind me of Idun and her apples. If anybody doesn't know, that's the keeper of the apples of the Norse gods. And she keeps the apples, which they go to whenever they feel that they are growing old and are refreshed in their immortality. So that's interesting symbolism in terms of the tale, and I hadn't actually thought that that was in any way involved in the legend.
uh, naturally, we don't have many stories involving oranges.
No, not
We're a
really,
bit
not
far
really
north
the
for
climate
that.
for it in Norway, is it?
No. Uh, we did actually have one story that where the hero goes to Arabia and manages to marry an Arabian princess, but it didn't
Hmm.
involve any oranges. So that's the closest thing we have. But yeah, it does remind me of Eden's apples as well. Oranges can be seen as little suns, so it sort of have the solar symbolism tied to it, which is interesting. Um,
Mm.
but I
Yeah.
haven't come across any story where just lying under a tree will heal you from venom. That is also very interesting.
No, that is very interesting. I guess refreshed himself from the orange tree could possibly mean that he ate one, but that's not made very clear.
No.
But yeah.
Oh, what came to me right now was a dragon is sort of synonymous with a serpent.
Yes.
They're often called a winged serpent. And as such, the tree could be the tree of knowledge. He's not eating any of the fruit, they're just keeping him safe from the venom of the winged serpent. So there might be some Christian symbolism in there, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think obviously there's going to be Christian symbolism, but I think it's shared really across a lot of religions that there is revitalizing fruit, revitalizing trees. I noticed that when I learned of trees of sacred fruit in paganism and in Christianity. We seem to take a little bit of a different approach about whether you should eat them or not. We do seem to differ on whether you should actually eat the fruit. But
Ah,
there is a continuous motif of it. But I think the main reason why I picked the St. George story is because I'd never been taught it in school. And I think it just encapsulates why I want to do this stream. Because I'm an English person who's never heard one of the most basic foundational myths of my own country, and I don't know how many other English people are in the position where they've never read our own myths, and I don't know how many people all over Europe are in positions where they maybe don't know basic folklore from their own countries because it was never valued in being taught to them in school. It's not been read to them by their parents. They read to them, you know, sort of different secular children's books about Elmo, and the Tiger Who Came to Tea is a big popular one in Britain. And, I remember being read all sorts of books, but never really any old tales. And I remember learning old dances, but never actually hearing, the wisdom of my ancestors spoken from the mouth of any adult that I knew. I
it's
gather,
sad.
yeah, I gather in Norway there's still a little bit more of a culture of telling the old tales, right?
It's quite strong actually. When I was in school, we had a huge project where we made a wall hanging with a scene from one of our fairy tales. It was Iron Nail Soup, which yeah, it's quite an interesting story that we might get into in a different episode. But we
Hmm.
also had a lot of it in daycare. My parents were very good at reading us fairy tales. We also had a tape of, I think that was the Brothers Grimm, but at least fairy tales from the continent. And between each song there was a piece of classical music, and I absolutely loved it. But a few years ago there was a recommendation for daycare centers to not have so much focus on Norwegian tales, but making them more international as the daycares become more international both in employment and in children. Uh, and that would, of course, be of on the cost of the Norwegian tales, and I really don't want to see that. But still, we have productions of the fairy tales being released. My copy is of the written work is a recent one with the old drawings that was in the original version from Asbjørnsen and Moe in the 1800s. They are really popular as gifts for the confirmation at 14, 15 years old, and they are released in audio form quite regularly. I think there's one being done now, in fact. So it's
Ah,
quite strong here in Norway still,
yeah,
and it's on children's TV, and
that
they
is. That is definitely very nice to know.
Yeah.
That's still very strong.
Mhm.
Canadian has made a comment about an old Norwegian tale about a wolf who eats the moon. I think, isn't that Fenris? He's
Um.
gonna eat everything, apparently. Just straight up everything.
Well, I was looking into the falcon symbolism earlier, and there was something about someone eating the moon, but I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. Uh,
Hmm.
See if I can just browse here and see if I can see it. It's the curse of reading too much in too short of a time.
Yes, all the stories kind of start to blur a bit because of the tropes that are common to
Yeah,
them. And you're
yeah,
like, wait, is this the one with nine-headed troll and the dragon, or the princesses and the bears and the? It gets like really quite a lot of information. Or at least I think it
swimming
does
as
with the
well.
Norwegian ones. The old English ones, like I say, I think we've done a bit of a shocking job preserving them in some aspects. So they can be a little bit hard to dig up.
Yeah.
Not too bad though.
No, but just seeing from the Norwegian perspective, of course we've heard of the Brothers Grimm. Uh, that is the specific one that is huge from
Hmm.
abroad, and H.C. Andersen from Denmark.
Yeah.
But not really many from other countries. When it comes to the British Isles, I've mainly just heard of, King Arthur and Robin Hood and those kinds of myths. Not,
Yeah. And
not,
certainly they're very good ones. They're classics
yeah,
for a reason. And
yeah,
I
of
did
course.
actually get to hear like some of the tales of Robin Hood, mostly when I actually visited Nottingham as a kid, and I did get to hear like some stuff about the tales of Arthur. But yeah, even that's not really prioritized in the curriculum. And that is just one of the reasons why we've got to do this. We've got to get it out there, create records, preserve our cultures and history, because people are not prioritizing learning it. And as you said, they were trying to internationalize stuff a bit in Norway, and I've
Yeah,
seen that done with retellings of Arthurian legend in Britain. They've tried to
yeah,
somewhat internationalize that too.
yeah,
So it's very important that we maintain a sense of what these tales originally were and mine them for all the symbolism and wisdom that we can get out of them, and maintain and honor the mindset of our ancestors just continually. And certainly, if anybody ever wants to send us in stories, I do believe we've got an email address with the for correspondence, so we'll probably put that out on one of our channels. So if you've got like really
um,
great stories that you'd really want us to have a look at, you could send us to them, and we'd try and consider them probably at a later date, because we are considering mostly Norwegian and UK stories right now. But we're certainly up for those sort of suggestions in the future. Yeah, there's our email. Links just dropped in the chat.
yeah.
Yeah.
We definitely would like any stories that you uh, have to contribute with, and because we want this to be a conversation with people, not just us sitting and lecturing. I would like to point out that I think every people should learn the stories of the people.
Mm.
So that's not what I'm objecting to with internationalizing the stories in our daycare centers. Uh, but what I'm concerned with is how the parents are losing control of what their children are learning. That is my main concern. Uh, the stories are told from parents to their children, um, and not every parent are that good at following those things up. Um, in a hectic everyday life, and of course I understand that, but that is one thing we should try to revive a bit, I think. And not just in the tales or everything, but in many ways. So much has been lost, since the 70s, when more and more children got into daycare and everything. We see that
Yeah.
quite a bit in Norway. While we are good at keeping our stories alive,
Mm.
most children are growing up in daycare centers these days. So
Yeah.
you do see traditions slipping away, even just from my mother's generation to me. Quite a bit has been lost already. So that is one of the things I want to counteract. And
Yeah. I think yeah. I think Mighty Goose's comment that it's a collective effort to patch up a large memory hole that we all have. Some countries in Europe more so than others about our old stories and our ancestors, and we can contribute to fixing that by doing what we do here. Definitely. I think we should start to maybe wrap up the stream because
I
we are, yeah, we sort of ended it, I think, on a good note of preserving, why we do this, why we preserve our native stories. I think that we should just say thank you to everybody who's been in the chat. Yeah, and oh, Novi says they've read the book Robin Hood when they're about 11 years old. It was about 50 years ago, and yeah, also yeah, classic British literature we do read, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Dracula. It's not quite the same as our folk literature, but it's still very important indeed.
yeah.
And let's
Uh,
see, the we had Besot and Miss Britannia. I think they had to leave. It was great to see Miss Britannia around. It was really nice. She helped us do our trailer. She
yeah.
was the one who did our trailer.
Oh
So that
yeah,
was
it's an
really,
epic one.
yeah,
So hail Miss Britannia.
indeed.
She has done amazing work and volunteering for it. So we are eternally grateful for that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Dee Dee had The
uh,
Hobbit read to him when he was a kid. That's an important one. That's
yeah,
great.
that's a great kid story as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just the really old tales we should try to keep alive, but most of our great literature
Yeah.
from the kids' tales like The Hobbit. We have our particular Norwegian ones as well. To
Yeah.
the great classics. I actually have The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes in a bound
Oh yeah. I
example.
love those. I love those.
Yeah,
I really did. I read The Hobbit and Sherlock Holmes and Narnia Chronicles, all of them. Lord of the
yeah,
Rings. So yeah,
yeah.
there's still a lot of classic literature that I had access to as a child, and it's just making sure that that's passed on as well through the generations, and they keep reading them, even if you have to make them sit down and listen to the classic tales and the classic literature.
I
Yeah,
do love the tradition of reading nighttime stories for the kids.
yeah,
I loved that as a child. And it really does install in you a love for stories. And
it does indeed.
hopefully a love of reading. Maybe not if you are dyslexic, but there's still audiobooks available, so it might instill a love to listen to the stories, if not reading them. And that is
Mm.
definitely something we should continue to pass on. Um,
And with that, hey, I suppose we can be a resource for dyslexic folktale lovers everywhere.
yeah,
Go do it for the dyslexics.
yeah.
Well,
We are playing with the
certainly,
thought
yeah.
of reading the stories and putting them out as a video, but that
Mm,
is further down the line.
yeah,
Uh,
it is. But
yeah,
we will see what we can do and develop in the future. Get some audio equipment, get some other people to read stuff. That would be all things we could do in the future with the project. But like I say,
yeah,
let's just see how it goes.
yeah.
And with that, we hope you all enjoyed some nice bedtime stories, and we hope you've all had a good evening. And
Stream
yeah,
with no politics,
no
just
politics,
relaxing.
all
Yeah,
relaxing, all white pills. That's what we're about on this
yeah,
stream. Just
yeah,
no drama, no nothing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just chilling out, focusing on the culture.
So,
Okay,
well,
so good night, everybody. I
good
hope to
night.
see you again next week.
Bye, Canadian and Lycomedes and Philomena and Novi and Jewel, Jody. Bye, everyone. Mighty Goose, bye.